think recording Into the Woods was, I'm not sure if it was a more drawn out process as what the first record was, but we'd made it in a similar way in that we, financially and time-wise, we tended to work on 2 or 3, 4 songs, do all the pre-production and get the songs to where they needed to be, and then go into the studio and record them. And then when that was done, we just continued the process.
No, to be honest, they're a bit hazy for me. And it was sort of, the whole process was stretched out over a longer period of time.
As Robbie said, the recording process is a bit hazy at this point because we started it a long time ago. I think we started it pretty much after the first record was finished. I think we pretty much went straight into the studio.
Yeah, we recorded at QUT in Kelton Grove, BBC, Tim Guitars.
So I was lucky enough to have access to the studio when we began cutting the record for Into the Woods, and we went in with 2 songs. One was Shadow Man, the other one was a B-side that hasn't come out yet. I was engineering, playing guitar. It's a bit of a mess, but I think we got some good results in the end.
Making the album Into the Woods was an interesting experience because I think we were coming down from a pretty intense period of recording, playing live, touring around Australia, and I think we were pretty exhausted. As we started recording the songs for the second album, we had a different sort of attitude about it. We were a bit more tired of the process, maybe a little bit more also used to each other and more comfortable in each other's presence. So there was a little bit of less pretense. We were more relaxed. I think it shows on the album.
I do remember the first sessions that we did at this university in Brisbane. We got some free time to record at the studio, and there's this like really totally pro studio with this massive SSL desk. And just being in that studio and just hearing the sounds of course we actually recorded a lot of it together at the same time.
And I think you can tell that we were less worried about how we came across and more just really enjoying recording, performing and playing and just letting it be whatever it was going to be.
Also recorded in a lot of different places for this album, I think probably more than we did with the first one. It's a really good feeling to be in a band that can actually lay down a song where at least the rhythm guitar and the bass and the drums are all playing together. That's the body of the song, so you do 2 or 3 takes and then choose the best one and then you move on. And I think a lot of this record was made that way. I mean, it's time efficient, but it's also a very true document of how the song sounds. It allows room for some push and pull in the song, which I really like. And a little bit of looseness too, which we talked about. I think with Sacred Shrines, it has been an ongoing thing that we've always wanted to leave some rough edges on things so they're not completely squeaky clean, and it's got a bit of edge to it, because I guess that comes from the music that we like.
I'm a big fan of this record actually. I'm very happy with it. I love the first one as well. It seems to take you on more of a journey. It seems to be more cohesive, song-wise, and just the way it's all laid out. It's like just an amazing piece of art.
I think it is really a continuation of where the first record sat as an album. This new one there's some threads that come through from that album, but it's also, there's some new territory as well, and I think we did discuss actually maybe chasing down some ideas that were places we hadn't been before. We obviously not wanting to repeat ourselves, but when you build a band, there's a sound that you create, and whilst it's a good idea sometimes to diverge from that, you still have a framework that you built, and so you almost need to move that framework with you, I guess.
It's less sort of a 60s psychedelic and a bit more kind of like, reminiscent of like a river festival or something. It's good. It's good for me because I was there.
I think Into the Woods compared to Come Down from the Mountain is a really good display of unique psychedelic music in its different forms. Come Down from the Mountain perhaps is more poppy in some way, shape or form, which was really unique for the landscape for psychedelic music at the time, particularly in Brisbane.
I had in my mind these ideas of vignettes of these little parts of songs that might not be complete songs, and also trying to maybe blend the tracks a little bit more from one to the next. That was a thing that is different on this record, and I'm really happy with how that came across. And it's something that I'd probably like to explore a little bit more in the future.
I particularly like The Hunter, Never Far From Where We Are, and Through the Haze. Yeah, they're probably my favourites. And Paint the Sky as well. It's always a fun one to play.
I think my favourite tracks, I've mentioned it before, but it's Keep All the Sunshine and The Hunter. Very different tracks. They're both great to record, they were really fun to record and great to play live.
At least to play live, it's Aching Bones. I feel like it's got a good tempo. It can translate well live. Probably my most busy song to play on guitar, so it's always enjoyable.
Well, it's early days for me. I'm still kind of looking at the set, going, how does this one go? Phil, can you mouth out the riff for me, please?
No, I'm very proud of the songs on the record. I think the stuff that we did at that university, Trail to Find, The Hunter, I think sonically they're really close to being the ones.
Also, another track's probably one of the slower ones, which was also on the EP before this album. It's called Never Far From Where We Are. I think it's probably one of our most dreamy tracks, the most ethereal side of our sound, and provides a nice break from the other tracks that are probably a bit more intense.
No, I just like the feel of them and the structure of the songs and the production more than anything. They're the songs I tend to always seem to resonate with the most.
I love The Hunter. I love playing it live. I like the tempo changes. I like slowing it down, bringing up the pace. I get to do a little, we get to have a freak out midway through, which is nice, like a good freak out.
Then there's other songs like Never Far From Where We Are, which I think I recorded at my own studio. I just like the different levels and the different nuances, or just the variety in the songs. I think that's probably my favourite thing about it. The COVID thing wasn't all bad. I mean, it was hard to be not aware of the immense loss that people were feeling across the world, and that sense of loss, seeing how difficult it was for people during COVID, and you have to be a cold person to not have that affect you.
2020 was a really interesting year because we had some changes within the band, and like I mentioned before, we were pretty exhausted from the first album and touring and doing a lot of recording. That bled into the strange time that 2020 was. So we really did take a step back, and I think it was necessary for us to kind of feel re-energized and to recoup, and it timed really well with us being able to release Enter the Woods in 2021 because we were ready. By then we were ready and we felt things had eased off a bit. Timing was right and the reception's been really good.
Can't say we even experienced a smidgen of it compared to other places.
It's a relief. Yeah, just, it feels like nothing's really changed. And that whole COVID thing just seemed to go really quickly for me. It's just great to, kind of get out there and do it again. It's like we never stopped doing it. Just kept on going. It was, a bit surreal too.
Playing live again has been unreal. I don't think anything beats it, as most people would probably be able to attest to. There's nothing quite like being in front of the raucous, energetic bunch of people. It was almost like nothing had changed, except a lot had changed. It's really good to be back on stage.
It's good. I don't think I've ever played live so much in all. It's, I guess locally. I mean, we can't really travel around much. Been really busy with it.
It's interesting to look at the album from a new lens and the band as itself from a new perspective, because I think the idea of producing a third album is exciting again.
Our lockdown situation in Brisbane was fairly minimal. We all knew how lucky we were, but we also weren't sure at the beginning how bad it was going to get here in Australia, particularly Brisbane. And it was quite clear pretty quickly that it wasn't as bad as what maybe it could have been. But still, having a lot of friends who live overseas, being aware of their situation and being respectful of what they were going through, to have that break from the machine of being in a band and like trying to write and record and play live, that was a valuable thing in terms of reevaluating your situation and appreciating what you didn't have for a while. I think that was really powerful. So to come back and play live again, for me, it's been pretty weird with Sacred Shrines. We've only played 2 shows actually since we've been back. Got Johnny playing drums. Playing live is probably one of the best things about being in a band. For me, the writing the songs and playing live are the 2 absolute highlights of being in a band. And then hanging out with your mates too, you know. Because of the way that we've been recording, it's really hard to remember the recording process because some of it started in about 2018 or maybe even a little bit before that.
Aching Bones, even though, like I said, it's probably my favourite track to play live. Probably went through about 3 different versions. I think acoustic piano was maybe added into the mix, which might have been my idea. I kind of had this idea of making it more of a maybe Beatlesy kind of number. The initial idea was to make it kind of a straight up kind of garage thumping tune. Probably ended up somewhere between my idea and that in the end.
The Hunter, actually, I was really wanting to get that down pat pretty solid, especially in the faster parts. We speed up a bit, and I'm quite happy with it. A lot of room to move around on that song in those parts.
I think that by far the most difficult song was Paint the Sky. It came out of a sort of demo that Matt Weatherall had made. It didn't have any lyrics or melody or anything, and I'm used to working in my own time and space and in my own head. And when someone else brings an idea to the band, it's much harder to work with other people's ideas because you're trying to get into their mindset and in their way of thinking it's more difficult, I think. Plus it's easy for me to kick myself around and be hard on myself. I think it took us a long time to get that song together, and I'm glad we did because it's something that I wouldn't have done myself in some ways, but in others it's kind of got a familiarity, and yeah, I'm glad we took the time to make that happen.
Some of the songs presented themselves as they should be and they didn't require any more further thought. Other songs probably needed a little bit more deliberation.
When I joined Sacred Shrines, I hadn't really sung with male voices much before. I'd done other stuff, but not as a member of a band like this. So the first album for me was just getting my legs and understanding how to sing and harmonise with Phil and how that balances between male and female voices. And then by Enter the Woods, we had a pretty good understanding of how that worked. So I think that was the most interesting part of recording the second album because those things that were once difficult flowed in a new direction.
Why did I make this question?
Yeah, why'd you?
Enter the Woods is probably a good record for any occasion. It's got something for every kind of mood, preferably on vinyl.
Yeah, definitely on vinyl. It's a glass of wine or something, or a drink, and at night time, sitting on the sofa, dim the lights a bit, crank the music up, and indulge.
It's really exciting. When I came home from work and all the records were sitting outside my door that came from the Czech Republic actually, because I didn't expect it, and so I've got these boxes of records. I took some photos of the record, put it on Facebook and just said, this is a pretty cool mail day. And I had a friend contact me and say, can I come around and listen to the record with you? And I had about 3 or 4 different listening parties that week with friends and family.
I would say the best way to listen to this album is dim the lights, maybe smoke a little bit of pot or whatever is legal where you are right now, just to ease into it and don't expect it to go anywhere because you're going to be wrong.
you could say, oh, I want a couch with a red wine and Barossa Shiraz. I think it's a fun, it's got its, party moments. I think it'd be nice with people, maybe with a nice, bit of sparkling, maybe a nice Chardonnay, cheese platter with friends.
It's so great to be able to crank it up and listen to it on vinyl and have a few drinks and sit on the deck. So that's the only way I can picture it. Maybe even being in a dark room with like some kind of psychedelic lighting. I think that would be a good way. With your favourite drink, maybe someone close to you. But I think it's definitely a record because of the way that we made it, that it's not really background music. I think it's made to listen to as a record because there's those hills and valleys and so I think it maybe sitting in front of the speakers or with headphones or with your favourite drink. I think that's the way to listen to it.
As much as I love blues, because it's just such a fun vibe, and it sounds really fun. It sounds good on stage, so very much. Yeah, it's good. I always love the zoo. Been playing it ever since I was a wee kitten. Seen so many amazing bands there. Sounds great. Yeah, it's one of my favourites.
Favourite venue is the Bearded Lady. I guess it's a lot of bands that we know and love either drink there or play there. It seems like a good environment. It's always inclusive. It's always got a good band playing there. Feels like home.
Yeah, the Bearded Lady. It's a fun venue to play at, and met a lot of people there, and a lot of friends' bands play there. It's just a overall good vibe.
One of the things about playing music in Brisbane, there's about 2 million people I think living here now. It is a place where there are so many places to play, and that is amazing, like live music. And I think pretty much any night of the week you can go and see live music. But some of my favourites, I love playing the Zoo. It's probably the longest running music venue in Brisbane for live music, and we've been fortunate to play a few shows there, but it's got a big stage and it always sounds good on stage and it just feels right. And we had the fortune of playing at Tivoli one time, which was again another amazing venue. It's a bigger venue, and so I really love playing there. We have our old favourite, the Bearded Lady, as well, but I think every show is different, and I think playing where you can see people's faces and you can feel the energy of the people in the crowd that's a really big part of it.
It's a really exciting time to be playing live music here, weirdly. After 2020, venues had to really rethink about the landscape of live music, and in some weird ways it's been good because having to pre-sale tickets, having a limited number for shows meant that people were really thinking about going to see live music and appreciate it. So a lot of venues changed the way that they approached it, such as the Zoo, and the Zoo is a pretty historic venue in Brisbane and important to live music here, so we want to keep those venues functioning and running really well. But like I said, the other guys sort of mentioned the Bearded Lady. It's such a great rock and roll, sort of a little bit old school pub vibes that we need more of so that we can just feel like live music in its rawest, purest form is still available to us to perform.
I'd like to say we've got another record in us, at least one record. I know that the previous experience of writing Enter the Woods record is probably, at least for me, one of the more enjoyable and easiest kind of experiences that I've had making music, at least bouncing ideas off people, getting inspired by their ideas and making it something bigger than they could have been maybe between individuals. So I'm holding great hope in what the future holds for the Shrines. Definitely think there's another good album.
Hoping to make a new record at some stage, hopefully soon. More live shows, more opportunities, hopefully go on a tour, around Australia, or, hopefully in the future at some point we go overseas.
I'm excited about just, coming up with me chops, putting my flavour in. Whatever Phil throws at us and whatever we jam on, I'd like to makes it tear up a bit, see what happens.
I think it'd be really interesting for Sacred Shrines to continue with that attitude of easing off, taking the pressure away from the band itself and not worrying about where it goes, because it's paying off for us at the moment. Even more collaborative, which is the direction we're going with everyone in the band.
Maybe not just having an album of songs, but maybe continuing that idea of vignettes a little bit more and having even more of a cohesive record where there's a flow to the songs, but also the record's telling not a story in a way of a concept album, but more of a, like, there's a transport from one song to the other, or there's trains left the station, but it's going through all these different landscapes, and I think that's what I'd like to do. But we haven't really started writing for another record, so when powers that be start giving us inspiration, I guess that's where that will begin.
How would you say being in Sacred Shrines rates?
Out of 10.
Yo, let's unpack that.
Was that too quick?
No, that was good.
Yeah, that's a really hard question. Good question, but hard. I'd have to rate 9 out of 10. Yeah, it's high up there. Well, no, fuck it, 10 out of 10.
Chops and all the things you can just sort of pull back and be in the song. That doesn't answer your question. I actually really like Shrines and I would buy the record anyway, so it's nice to be part of that. What was the question?
That's a really nice sentiment, Johnny, but still haven't answered the question. Whether I'd like to be. All that stuff is really good. I'm glad you said that. How do you feel about Johnny Big Fans?
Johnny Big Pants is a dick.
Johnny Pigpants.
I love him, he's a gem.
Anyway, thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you guys. Thanks for listening.
Cut. Cut.
Probably one of the most vivid memories of making the record was I had a couple of days recording some songs at Tim's Studios with Donnie, and I came home, it was a Sunday night, and I was having a few drinks and listening to the rough mixes, so I was listening to what we'd done that weekend. I was, feeling really good about it. We'd, come home from recording and I'd loaded all the gear into our living room. Your living room usually can negotiate it in the dark because you've done it many times. I'd sort of misjudged where the cases were, the guitar cases and everything, and after I turned the light off and I went through the living room, and this is a Sunday night about 11 o'clock, I, in the dark, tripped over my guitar pedal case, and then holding a beer still, fell straight over and smashed my face onto the side of the guitar case. Did a pretty good job of it. There was like a lot of blood on the carpet. There was a lot of screaming too. Well, maybe one loud, like blood curdling sort of scream. I was supposed to go to work the next day and I've got this huge gash on my face. I don't know if you can see it. Fortunately, it got sideburns. Picked myself up, finally. We called a few emergency ward type situations, and it wasn't a life-threatening problem, but it was still quite a big. I've never been hospital or any of that, so it was quite a shock to me. So we patched it up, and I don't want to get too gory, but I could feel that there was blood kind of filling up in this patch situation. I'm like, I'm not going to spend a couple of hours in the emergency ward tonight on a Sunday night. It's going to really ruin my time. I went to bed with this massive patch on my face, and of course, still bleeding through the night. And then the next day I had to do the walk of shame to the doctor, and of course they want to know I wasn't self-harming or anything, so I had to tell him the story. And I was very glad he didn't make me shave my sideburns, but of course I think it was like 5 or 6 stitches, you know. Cut a long story short, I think my modelling career might be over. I'd actually forgotten about it till just now, but that is probably the most poignant story of making Into the Woods.